Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone to the August 26, 2024 Administrative Services City Council Committee meeting. Present are Vice Chair Jim Petrus and President of Council Tony Kuda and the Chair. The three of us are here. The first item on our agenda is to consider some resolutions that have been submitted to us by Mayor Sarin concerning appointments to the Arts Commission and also to the Community Improvement Corporation. And I just thought we would go through these applicants in order. And I was expecting the mayor to join us. I think he may want to speak on these candidates, but some of them, or many of them, we already know. So why don't we just go in the order they're listed on the agenda. The first person up is Drew Herzig, who I believe we are all familiar with.
Oh, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
There's one or two people in this list that we don't have an application for.
Right.
And I kind of thought that was the purpose, just one. And I thought that was the purpose of the mayor being here, because obviously we, read the rest of the ones with a resume or an application.
And if there's anyone that we feel that we want to have come in for an interview, then I would defer to any council member that thinks that they want to interview anybody before voting for them. It may or may not be necessary, I don't know.
This executive session that's on the agenda to consider the appointment of a public official, that's for these people, right?
Well, it's for any discussions that we want to have about confidential or personal matters or issues that we would normally hold when we're considering any applicants for any of our boards. But, in this case, their names are public. They've already been introduced as a resolution by the mayor. So, yes, we can defer and discuss them in the executive session.
Okay.
But since they're already known to the public and we've already posted their applications online, I think it's appropriate to have a discussion about it if you want to, or we could just move on. Yes.
So being new to the organization, I guess I'm wondering, do we have a history of inviting folks in for interviews?
Well, here is where we have done interviews at this point. We have done interviews for Planning Commission because of the length of that appointment and because they have a decision-making power. And so those are, obviously, we want to have a discussion with them, find out, their knowledge, their background, their experience, more than appears from the resume. But in terms of our appointments typically to these boards and commissions, no. But this is a new process with the mayor appointments to the Arts Commission, and we've never had to pass on any CIC appointments. This is the first for that. So I don't know if I guess I did answer your question. The normal procedure is not to have hearings on these people or interviews.
But ABR might be an example.
Yes. So we could talk about this, yes, because they do have a longer term. I need to double check that. Anything anyone wants to say about
but here's the thing, these applicants, so the fact that these were read into the record on a first reading is just a happenstance of that we got that's how we were introduced to this, not at a administrative services committee meeting, which it would be just a timing thing for us to be discussing these in executive session. I'm talking about the appointments. So I don't know if just the fact that they've been introduced, I mean, they haven't been discussed.
And here's the mayor right now.
Bonjour. How's everybody today?
Good, how are you?
My
Doing
phone,
all right.
just on big emergency.
Mayor, as we were just discussing in general the appointment process and Councilmember Petrus had asked a question about whether we typically interview people for these board appointments. And I said we typically had not been doing that except in the case of Planning Commission or any of the other bodies where we've had a long-term appointment and there's a quasi-judicial function to them. And also typically, we discuss applicants in an executive session. At least from my viewpoint, it's similar to when you're interviewing someone and personal matters may come up, or we may want to get into confidential questions. And I know that's troubling to some members of the public that we do have those executive sessions. And so that's when you happen to come in right now. We had just, mentioned Drew Herzig's name, and I didn't know if you wanted to, make some comments on these people. And I think then to the extent that we're going to have some discussions about them, we would do it in an executive session.
Well, okay. I suppose that's a possibility. Can I? Do you have time for me to sort of express how I expected things to be?
Yes. Why don't? Yeah. These are your appointments, and this is sort of a new thing. So yeah.
Sure.
What's your preference as to how this is handled?
Well, okay, and I want to preface this with the complete understanding that my preference is, not what council has to do or the process that council has to go through. But it was my expectation that my appointments would go through a confirmation hearing, that there would be something set up so that, either if council went through Administrative Services Committee as per normal, or if there was some other mechanism that, the applicants would sit down in front of council and me, and I could have a conversation with you guys about why I chose them, and they would have actually more of the conversation would be with them about why they're interested and what they bring to the table. And my expectation is that conversation would be a public confirmation hearing, as one would expect in the variety of confirmation hearings that occur at multiple levels of government. And then if council chose to or needed to, would deliberate potentially in executive session if it wanted to, or not if it doesn't, and then make a recommendation to the full body one way or another. That's sort of how I anticipated that this would go. I've been, prepping people for confirmation hearings and a conversation with council. I thought that was sort of going to be the standard. Certainly it's a little, more of a vetting process. But I think that's important. And I think it's important for the people to see that conversation as well, and sort of see who is being appointed to the bodies that will be assisting the government in doing its variety of work.
I don't know that I don't know in every case that it's necessary to have a confirmation hearing. I know that we've done it for some of the director level appointments. We did it for the city administrator. But I'll defer to the rest of the council members as to it, because this could become a very lengthy and cumbersome process to hold a hearing on every one of your applicants when it's someone that we may not have any questions about is perfectly qualified for the position.
Well, and I appreciate that, and I'm sure that people who otherwise might have, 20, 30 minutes of their time back, would appreciate it. I guess my experience, at other levels of government just sort of informed what I anticipated in this new system. I know historically the way appointments have been made for these boards and commissions has, you know what it's been like in the previous form of government. And so I anticipated something a bit different and a little bit more robust. If council either does not want to do that for specific appointments or for any of them, I like I said, I recognize it's not my preference that rules the day on council's process.
And I think it's a decision that all of council should make about what they want to do. I don't know if there's a recommendation that you all want to make. I'll just speak first. My preference is that it be done on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. That was not my expectation that we were gonna have hearings. Although, again, ABR, BZA, planning,
We'll have them in.
yes, I mean, that is my expectation for those three. And then, for this, the one, an arts commission is kind of, to me, very similar to a lot of the appointments that we already make. The CIC is a little bit different than anything else we do. And maybe, I don't know, how do you see that? I kind of see that as different than kind of the boards or commissions.
Right. Because ultimately I'm assuming have a considerable budget to be working with and make some proper decisions. I can see where it would be warranted for that.
Yeah. So I'd be certainly willing to do that for the CIC.
I'm not sure that I have a strong preference as of now. I think that I'd probably defer to what you might want to see have happen here. I do understand what you're saying about how for many of these we may not have questions and may be prepared to vote. It's always nice to still have the ability, if we need to invite people in if anyone has, any questions. And I do like your suggestion that maybe we ask some of the other council members if they happen to have a strong preference. But ultimately, this is your committee, and so I think that I'm going to strongly defer to what you prefer.
I appreciate it. Again, I think this is a decision that all of council should make about whether they want to have confirmation hearings for the mayor's appointments and whether we want to have hearings for our appointments or do as we have done in the past. So is there a recommendation we want to make to the council to the next
Maybe I'll.
right? My preference is that if we do it on a case-by-case basis, with the exception of the ones that we're currently holding interviews on that you mentioned earlier, planning ABR,
Yeah.
and then the CIC is probably a good suggestion to do it for those
Yeah.
as well. But again, if there's someone that's been submitted for CIC that we all know that it's, obviously well qualified for the position and we don't have any questions about them, I think we should reserve the right to be able to go forward with that appointment without holding a hearing on them.
I mean, part of me thinks this should be done at a committee level, but, I'd be perfectly willing to run it by the rest of the council.
We have so much on our plates over the next
Yeah.
couple of months to try and schedule hearings, confirmation hearings, when we're dealing with ARPA charter review. We want
Budget.
these committees up and running. So I think whatever we can do to expedite that process, prudently we should do.
I mean, to me, it's like if there's an abundance of candidates or we're not sure if we want A or B because A and B both look really good.
Yeah.
That's the time, but a lot of times you look at the resume and you see quite a good, amount of information, so.
Okay,
Now, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I did want to bring up something. I know I'm still working on getting India Birdsong Terry's application over, but I did have her bio that she sent over, and she's going to get me that application as quickly as she can. So I just wanted to pass out to the committee the bio, just so you have it. And we'll make sure we get you
thank you.
the application as well.
I know she's extremely busy. Again, this is someone that should be known to all of us.
Oh, I do know her. I've seen her on the show at the City Club. She spoke to the City Club at length, maybe a year ago. Very impressive.
Right, and Mayor, since it's your appointment, to the people that are watching or will watch, why don't you tell us who India Birdsong is?
I didn't know she lived here.
Well, I think we
Neither did
are
I.
very fortunate. We do have quite a wealth of talent in this community. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. We've got so much talent here that we rarely find involved in sort of municipal affairs. And so that's one of my goals, is to see if I can cast a wider net and loop in those people who are doing things like she's doing. And just for the people watching, if there's anybody watching, India Birdsong Terry is the current CEO of the Greater Cleveland Regional Transit Authority, RTA, and is, obviously that is a huge job in and of itself, and is trained in urban planning and development, and I think that it's especially interesting to have the perspective of her professional world relative to what the CIC will be taking a look at, which is development, industrial and commercial development of the city, residential development of the city, as sort of a nonprofit partner to the city. Because transit-oriented development and density issues and transportation issues related to the development of a city like ours are vital. And so I think just to get a taste of why I think that she would be a great pick for this particular board, that perspective and having a intense knowledge of the transit issues in our community and the surrounding communities and how the communities interact through that web of transportation, I think is a really important perspective to have as we're thinking about developing our commercial districts and our neighborhoods.
Thank you. And while we're talking about the Community Improvement Corporation, you want to say a few words about Corey Clark? I think that's the other applicant that you're submitting.
Sure, and I don't want to step on Corey's sort of explanation of himself and his career and what he brings to the table, but I will say this. Mr. Clark is, he's currently an employee of KeyBank, working in community development work primarily, affordable housing and other projects. And I think that his work in community development finance is something that makes him especially well suited for this particular board. He is somebody who is a younger person than sometimes we normally find getting themselves engaged in municipal matters. And I think he's somebody who wants to see this community grow and thrive. I think that is a very deep and deeply held conviction of his. He wants this city to, progress in the way that we all know it can. And I think what he brings to the table is that understanding of that private finance side of how developments occur, how they create benefit for the communities that they exist in. And I think that we would do well to have him on board on this particular board as well.
All right. I apologize because we did jump around, departed from the agenda. We had started out talking about the resolutions starting with the Arts Commission, and we had talked briefly about Drew Herzig, and then the next person. And I don't know if you wanted to offer some words on Drew Herzig. I think we all know him. I believe we previously had appointed him to the senior Commission on Aging.
He was on the Commission on Aging. And then he was a member of the CRC, the Charter Review Commission. And I think, something to note, and I think why he was appointed to those boards previously, he brings, I think, a wealth of knowledge of sort of municipal experience generally. I believe he's been on maybe 2 city councils before. And he's got long experience, and has been involved in the arts for quite a while, performing arts. But you all have you do.
Mhm.
I've provided all of
Yes.
this.
Yeah, we do.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. So again, I assumed that the appointees would have the opportunity to sort of talk about themselves. I haven't developed a spiel for them myself, but if you'd like for me to, I can work on that. If you didn't want to have sort of a hearing beyond their resumes. I think, what I'm looking for and what I think Drew provides is sort of a willingness to express his opinion, which I think you need especially when it comes to something as subjective as art, and moving forward with that kind of thing. You need people who are willing to be strong voices, and I think he's provided an example of that. And I think also sort of a dedication to sort of the municipality and a dedication to the city that is important. And so that's why I think that he's a very other than his experience in performing arts. I think that it's an important perspective to have in an organization that is just starting. So.
Okay, thank you.
I invite any questions that I may or may not be able to answer.
Next up is the resolution appointing Deirdre McPherson as a member of the Arts Commission. Any words on her?
This for every person? 'Cause-
Well, let's just keep it brief.
Sure. So, in looking for people, some of the things that I'm thinking about, and this goes back to, where people what people are bringing to Cleveland Heights from elsewhere. I think Ms. McPherson is a really phenomenal example of someone who has, and frankly, a lot of our artists and people in the arts world in Cleveland Heights are examples of people who are doing work outside of the boundaries of our city. We've got people who are doing work in Cleveland Heights as well, but we got a lot of people who live here, and we call it home to the arts because they live here, but then they're doing work outside of our city, and she is one of those people. She's obviously worked at MoCA, worked at the Art Museum, and now at Assembly for the Arts, is instrumental in a regional arts council, which is what Assembly for the Arts is. I think that perspective, that sort of management and funding and coordination perspective, development perspective is really important for an organization like this as we set it up. We'll need that perspective. I think that it'll be crucial as well as the Arts Commission moves forward to have a perspective from an Arts Council so that we've got somebody who very, very clearly and through their own professional experience knows the difference between an Arts Commission in this context and an Arts Council in the context of, say, the regional or even like our local arts council.
Okay. Next up is Nathan Mata, did I say that correctly?
Yeah.
For the Arts Commission.
So, looking at his resume and the work that he's doing right now at Obama, directing that organization, it's a jewel in Cleveland Heights. I think, and Mr. Mata's contribution there and his interest in being on this arts commission and helping Cleveland Heights sort of leverage the arts organizations that we have and bring new arts organization to the fore. I think that's, I don't know, I feel like these people's resumes kind of speak for themselves. So I don't know what more there is to say, but these are, again, not the total contingent either. But I think that these are an extremely good start, including Tony Sias as well at Caribou. So like I said, I'm not sure what more to say about these individuals because they're all phenomenally qualified, and they're interested in Cleveland Heights embracing the arts in a more robust way. And again, I think Nathan Mata and Tony Sias are both examples again of people who are actively doing this work, but haven't been involved as individuals in sort of the municipal discussions about things. They are in the art world and we haven't brought them into the conversation, but I think that they are, extremely qualified people that we would be fortunate to have on board.
Okay. And I thought you mentioned Caribou for Mr. Sias, he's the CEO of that organization. Okay.
And I mean, there isn't much to say about Caribou, that everybody doesn't already know.
So these 4 names that you've submitted would give us a quorum so they could start to meet if they're approved.
It could be a quorum because the minimum number is 7, and they could begin the process of sort of organizing themselves. But I'm still actively looking. In fact, I've got several meetings sort of on future calendars to make sure that we're getting more people as quickly as possible. Another thing that some of these people do a lot of traveling. So some of these people I'm waiting to get back into town to have the conversation as well.
And the 2 resolutions for the Community Improvement Corporation, that would give us enough to be able to start having meetings with them.
Yes, actually 1 would, and I anticipate providing a couple more candidates very shortly.
Okay. So that covers all of the resolutions.
Just as a heads up as well, Lead Safe Advisory Board, I'll be submitting some appointees for that as well in the very near future.
Okay. Yes.
Are we able to learn how many applications you've received for each of these?
Well, it is all public record, so absolutely.
Should we, I guess, Addie, are you able to?
Yeah, I'll send you an email to remind you.
Okay. I mean, I don't think that I need to know like the names. I'm just curious to know how
curious how
many.
many, yeah.
Okay. So that covers all the resolutions for anyone that's watching. The next item on the agenda is a review of our resident boards and commissions. This was just a standard item on the agenda. The one matter that there is some concern that we need to start getting some applicants and filling out is for this Fair Practices Board. I was going through some old paperwork that I had received from Susanna back when she was the city manager, and I can't find the resolutions that council passed, but there were two people appointed to that board, a Jeff Smith and a Thomas Nobbe. I don't know either of
We might
them.
not have appointed by resolution back then, because you could have just made a motion to appoint.
Yeah, I don't know. Mayor, do you remember anything about those two? Were you on, it says their terms were due to expire at the end of 22.
I do not have any recollection whatsoever.
All right. What I would ask Addie to do is let's follow up with them and find out if they're still interested in continuing to serve, and I'll get you some information to get something posted on.
Do you happen to have contact information for them, or is that something you want
I
to slip
might
around?
have Jeff Smith.
And I do have an address for I'm gonna butcher the name, Nobbe or Nobby, so I'll get that information to you, but I don't have phone numbers for either one. I have an address for Jeff Smith.
Mr. Chair. Again, you know, here's sort of providing a perspective. It may be worthwhile to go back out into the community and try to find, you know, people who are engaged in this kind of work. And could bring sort of some new voices to this very important duty.
Right, and that's my intention. I would like to see if they would wanna submit an application, since apparently we appointed them. And to my knowledge, they've never met to consider any complaints, and I don't know, have we had any complaints filed?
As far as
Not that
I've
I'm
been made
aware of.
aware, we don't have any complaints.
Okay, all right. And I think that covered,
Well, I
yes,
do wanna bring up something as well, the Parks and Recreation Youth Advisory Board.
yes,
We did post about that in the city newsletter, that we were seeking applications. Vice President Russell and I discussed potentially putting a deadline on that, because they do have specific terms, for their year being commencing October 1st and ending May 30th. So, any thoughts?
Have we received applicants?
I have not yet, however, I do have a teacher who had reached out wondering if there was a deadline, because she will be speaking to her students next week to go over the application.
Can you remind me of the age range?
It's 15 to 23 years
Okay.
and 6 from public high schools, 2 freshmen, 2 sophomore, 2 juniors, and at least a third from private school or parochial or homeschool.
Oh,
So, I mean, it's great that that particular teacher is going to talk with her students about it. Is it worth us maybe reaching out to some of the principals and letting them know in hopes that they might be able to disseminate it, and maybe we could get
I
more?
would highly recommend.
yeah, well, that was gonna be my next question, whether she'd asked you to contact the schools.
She specifically did not, but I would definitely say that is something that would probably be a good idea.
Okay, so,
Because it is in the newsletter, but
yeah, if you could reach out to the schools that are within the city. And also, gosh, we have students that are going to schools that aren't in Cleveland Heights, right?
yeah, because it also mentions
Just,
Shaw here as a public high school as well.
okay,
Okay, so I will contact those
so there's,
and all the private schools and
so, you know, you've got Hawk, and we have some Ignatius, St. Ed's. We have a lot of schools that
Yep.
have Cleveland Heights residents that aren't in the city.
Yep.
Okay. Was there something else, or did I cut you off?
I think that's it,
Okay,
unless you wanted to make a deadline now, or just think about it and get back to me, because I do have to talk to the law department about the terms here, just because I am slightly confused about it, because they're supposed to be 20-month terms. But
Well-
also between October 1st and May 30th.
I think it's gonna be difficult to get applicants in, and then we need to discuss with Vice President Russell what she wants to do about these appointments.
Yeah, so I would not think that the October 1st would be, I don't think we could have it done by then, but for this year. But I mean, in the future, that would be ideal, is what we would wanna get kids probably applying at the end of the school year for the next.
Or look at, does the legislation need to get amended to?
That's what I wanna talk
adjust
to a
for
lot
that.
about as well.
Okay.
So.
All right. Yes.
Just as a bit of, I don't know, unsolicited advice, if you are working with a group that is intended to provide some sort of recommendations, advice, perspective, I'm assuming to council, related to recreation specific to youth, having them not active in the summer. I mean, a lot of youth recreation happens in the summer. So there may be some benefit in at least revisiting the term and not having it coincide necessarily with the school year. And that may cause other problems, but it's at least something to consider.
So,
Yes.
It'll be, I think, good to have applications at the rec center, because that's, or just in general places where our youth go. It's just a suggestion, but
Is this a paper application sort of?
Well, there's both. So
well,
I'm working with Steve right now to get the one on. Like right now, you can download it and fill it out. It's a fillable form, but having it on the website is usually a lot easier.
Maybe we could get something at the front desk at the community
Yeah.
center.
I just don't see kids going online looking for stuff like this, and I don't know. I should say kids. Some of them. If you're 23, you're not a kid. But
Yes.
That's why I'm thinking that like reaching out to people like the principals
Mm-hmm.
are the way that we're most likely to get people, because they might know specific students, or they might tell their teachers, who will then like specifically, maybe take 10 or 15 minutes to talk with the students about it, pull it up, maybe recommend some people. I suspect that that's the way that we're most likely to get it. Even if we had an application at the community center, unless we had like a large board saying, ask about, this advisory group.
yeah, well, that's,
I don't
that's
know.
what you need.
I
Yeah,
don't
you wouldn't
know
just
how
put it there.
likely
You'd have to put
would
some
be
kind of
to get
advertising.
folks, so.
And then I could ask, this thing that I do every year with Reaching Heights, many villages, we have access to the high school on a weekly basis. It might not start until October 1st. Could be wrong. It might start in September, but
And then we need to reach out because there's non-voting adult members of the board, which would be currently Anthony, because he's the Community Relations and Recreation Committee Chair, and then a Cleveland Heights Library Administrator, and then Cleveland Heights High School teacher would be appointed by the school district. So we'd have to I have to get in touch with them anyway, so I'll ask them about that as well.
Okay. Before we go into an executive session, that is, if anyone's inclined to make that motion,
Actually, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
before you go into executive session, could I briefly ask a question
Yes.
after you're done with? I didn't want to interrupt, but
No, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I wanted to ask the clerk, is this a special meeting of the committee?
This current one
Yes,
that we're in, no,
okay,
it's our regular standing time.
regular standing time, okay. And I'm going to make a request that obviously if the committee is not ready to accede to, that's fine, but I wanted to make a request that the committee amend its agenda and maybe have sort of a preliminary discussion about the legislation that was removed from the agenda. It doesn't preclude other conversation, but I figured more discussion can't hurt, and delaying ethics legislation maybe isn't the best bet.
Well, I'll allow you you're here a couple of minutes to speak on that if somebody wants to, I guess,
Well, we can always do it in other,
in the other, yeah.
so you could just.
But
do
so
other
why
if
don't
you want.
why don't we reverse things? Why don't we deal with the other now? Yes, and then we'll have the executive session. That way no one's left, hanging on.
Well, I guess there isn't much more to say, sort of as the initial pitch and explanation for the legislation as introduced. I think it's a way that we can sort of button up certain things that have been, I've said it before, lacking or been considered lacking. And looking back, I think it was actually 2021 that we started having discussion about shoring up Cleveland Heights ethics legislation, and that's when the federal prosecutor who prosecuted the county corruption case and is a Cleveland Heights resident, Ms. Rowland, came to a meeting and sort of discussed and had reviewed some of the ethics regulations at the county level and took a look at Cleveland Heights regulations and gave us the advice. We can go back and take a look at that conversation, but gave us the advice that we should shore up. We should start making some changes and do things a little bit more, with more rigor. And so this is sort of an entry into doing exactly that work. And in part, I think it's supposed to make our jobs easier as well. All too often, I think we saw it at the last, might have been the last council meeting. You can remind me exactly when we passed the recommendation from for the union contract. We've still got a little ways to go based on the discussion there, but sort of having a more proactive focus on our conflicts of interest, I think, have already had an impact. But I think that there's still a little bit more to go, and I think passing this, sort of providing that proactive look into where our entanglements are as decision makers for this city, so that we're not unaware, as I think people have been, and there's sort of demonstrated, I'm going to get into the specific cases, but demonstrated concern about people either not being aware or not caring, I can't say which, that those entanglements should lead them to recuse, and they have not. So this is sort of a way that we can protect ourselves. That's the conflict of interest disclosure work. And then I think that it just makes sense. We've got .govs for a reason. We made the switch for a reason. When we are operating in our official capacity, it makes sense to operate in our official capacity through every mode of communication that we engage in. And since that's available to us, it should be, and I think the law director maybe spoke to this and could potentially speak a bit more on this. When it comes to public records requests, we do want to provide records as quickly as possible, and having a specific channel that the law department can use to respond to those public records requests in the most immediate way possible is a way that we can avoid accusations of delay or inappropriate denial. It just kind of makes sense. So short segue, open to questions if people have them. And I'm looking forward to sort of Cleveland Heights entering the 21st century on this.
I guess I'll go first. Certainly this is a discussion worth having. I just think the timing of the introduction of that legislation, given what is going on right now, it's bad timing. I want to tamp things down. And again, the timing and the introduction of that with what's going on in the investigation of council, I didn't think it was helpful
Okay, I hear you. And if
from
I,
an appearance standpoint. And so I think it's legislation that we should put a hold on until the investigation of council is finished, and then we can have a look at it without the cloud of this investigation being around that legislation. That's just my personal opinion
I
on
hear
it.
you. If I could just briefly respond, I think I hear what you're saying, and I'm sensitive to the concept that you're bringing up. I will say this though, you know, I think that in terms of being good policy, I think both of these items are good policy, and I think the best time to make a good decision is yesterday. The second best time is right now. So that's the first thing that I would say in response. The second thing though, and I think maybe I would like to help you, or at least offer another way to look at the optics of the situation. I know that we don't elevate optics above sort of the substantive work that we do, but I also know that optics are important. You know, I've been since 2021, you know, working on this. So this is a long time coming. But I would offer though that the optics of not doing it are worse than the optics of doing it and putting it in place now. It doesn't have to be controversial, doesn't even have to be connected. It's just good policy.
Yes.
So I know, maybe it was Addie or you, I can't remember, who said that some council members who were also interested were not able to attend this meeting. So is it your thought that this would be discussed at a special meeting between now and the next regularly scheduled meeting, when whatever council members would like to join who are not available to join this meeting would be available to join? Is that your thought?
Well, I don't know. We have the president here. I think that's, you know, maybe a decision since it impacts all of council. But again, my opinion on it is we should not vote on that legislation until the investigation is complete.
Could I,
But, you know, I'm sorry.
I guess just one other thing. So I guess if there is a meeting scheduled, I think from my perspective, I would like to have the law director here so that we could have a chance to ask him questions. So if that's whether that's at a special meeting or the next regularly scheduled meeting, if there is a discussion, I think that would be helpful for me.
Since some council members expressed desire to weigh in on this, it's a meeting I think that we should have as all of council present versus a committee meeting, but that's just my own call. I know you referred it to my committee, but I think everyone's gonna wanna weigh in on it and not just have you know, the views of 2 or 3 of us on it.
Well, I didn't expect we were gonna vote on it the next time, so that's why I referred it to committee.
Yeah,
But I hear you on the optics, and I agree with you. But if there's a desire to air this out in committee of the whole, we can do that.
well, maybe at our next council meeting, we can discuss whether we want to set this up.
It may not fit in the next one, but it could fit eventually.
Okay.
Yeah.
At least for, just 2 minutes to do a round robin, not to have a full-blown discussion is like, here's what, I'll hold this committee meeting. This is gonna be the topic of discussion. All of those that wanna participate, then we need to try and do a doodle poll to make sure that the hearing is scheduled for them and also accommodates the mayor's schedule.
Yeah, my recommendation would be to add to the upcoming committee of the whole meeting, committee report section, so we could do a couple minute spiel about this meeting, in that meeting.
Oh.
If you're just talking about going around the horn and everybody talks for 30 seconds, that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. All right,
Sorry,
yes.
for clarification, you mentioned hearing just now. Are you referring to hearings for any of the applicants that we have before us? or
Well,
nominations?
the committee hearing that I'm talking about is on the mayor's proposed legislation.
Okay.
Okay,
I have something else about
Yes.
the application process, vacancies, term limits, and just kind of broader, you know, this. So we need to make some decisions here. You know, speaking with the chairs every year, and when we're gonna do that, you know, we need to set this stuff up. I mean, that's and making uniform rules across the, you know, the committees. We went to a lot of committees and there's kind of staggering stuff going on. That's not the right word, but stuff is staggered differently. You know, maybe making that more uniform, finding out what the needs are of the committees, you know, from the chair's perspective. Any attendance problems, or just like you say, any attendance issues. Again, you know, kind of making that kind of uniform and getting the chairs to buy into whatever that is. And let's see, what else?
we're looking at October 28th. Is that the date we were gonna have all these committees in,
Yes.
the committee chairs? All right, can we
Yes.
get invites out to them?
Just like save the date,
Yes,
you
save
know,
the date.
for the chairs.
Okay.
Do these committees all have vice chairs?
No, not all of them.
Okay.
And that's probably a meeting that we'll need to schedule in the evening. I suspect
It's
that
at
most of
6
those
o'clock.
people work. Okay, we did set it at 6.
That makes sense.
I'll make sure that Steve can handle that.
And I wrote a note here, and this happens when you write a note and then time passes. I wrote a note to myself saying assign a council person to each committee. Is there anybody that isn't assigned? I mean, there really isn't a committee for you to attend. Or really you. But, so Parks and Rec, yes. Municipal services, yes. Safety and health,
I would say that probably would be Lead Safe Advisory Board once it's up and running.
okay.
And
While you're writing that down, I don't know that that needs legislation. I think.
No.
that
No,
you-
yeah,
you-
which is,
You're
yeah,
empowered to do
No,
it, I think.
I'm just,
spitballing.
uh, and finance. No. Is that all the committees?
Of ours, yeah.
Well, so planning, you know, always, I mean, if you're not going to the planning commission or the ADR, you're missing a lot. And those aren't recorded. I don't know what it would be like. I've never read the notes. If I'm interested, I go.
I'm actually thinking
But-
housing and building would probably be Landmark Commission. Just a thought.
If you're so inclined. But, you know, I'm not saying every planning commission meeting is like must-see TV, so to speak, but it's, you know, there's
Yeah.
definitely times when,
Good stuff.
It was
Yeah.
hit and miss when we would have a council member regularly attending the planning commission. For the big stuff, yes, but I'd say more often than not, there was no one there.
and again, it's not a mandate, it's just a suggestion that, you know, council members attend these. Okay, that's all. I was just reading my notes and making sure that,
Tell you what, I'll go through the boards and commissions and identify the ones where it specifies there's a council member and those that don't. And then I would suggest that, you know, in an upcoming meeting, you say, here's the list, we need a council liaison who wants to be that liaison for that committee or board or commission.
And I think how you can help, and maybe you already do, I think you already do this, but just sending an email, I know you send the council calendar for the week, but maybe sending an email to the council person when that week, you know,
Gotcha.
because I don't know how people read these emails, and I don't want to disparage anybody because maybe everybody reads everything, but that would probably be a good process thing, you know, where they get something from you the week that the committee's meeting.
Okay, anything else? All right. Can I get a motion on this executive session?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion for our committee to go into executive session for the consideration, the appointment of a public official.
All right. I'll second.
Oh,
I
All in
assume you
favor,
don't
say
need
aye.
me for any of this?
No, we don't, Mayor. Thank you for coming.
Absolutely. Have a
All in
wonderful
favor?
day.
All in favor? Aye. And so for anyone that's watching, when we're done with the executive session, that's gonna conclude the meeting, so we'll just come back on to sign off.
Patty, do we not need a roll call?
Oh, you're right. Petrus.
Aye.
Cobb.
Aye.
Kuda.
aye.
Alright.
Okay, we're back on the record at 5:22 PM or close to it. We've concluded our executive session, and I believe that Councilmember Petrus has a motion he would like to make.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to motion to return resolution 132, 133, 134, 153, 154, and 155 to the full council for consideration.
I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
No opposed, so that passes. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you if you were watching and stuck around to the end.